Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather here with my co host Preston Chandler, and together we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark some creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation coaching and strategy. Today's guest is a longtime friend and coworker who brings some grit, systems thinking, and the rare ability to translate strategy into real operational momentum. We're joined by Perry Puccetti, Executive Director of Operations at VML, where he's leading one of the most ambitious transformation efforts in the agency's history. Perry's background spans the military, federal R&D, as well as enterprise innovation, and he's known for helping organizations move beyond the theory of transformation into the actual work of making it real. Whether he's driving the migrations across thousands of users or codifying design principles for cultural change, he focuses on alignment, clarity, and results. Perry, we're happy to have you here. Hopefully, I got your last name right this time.
Yeah, you did. Good to see you, JL and Preston. Always a fun time
Always a
talking.
pleasure.
So maybe just to dive in, Perry, you've been in the military, you've worked in the federal space, you've worked in the private sector, you're kind of across the full spectrum of opportunities. I'm curious, how has that shaped your philosophy on leadership during transformation?
It's funny you mentioned my background. Some would say that would make me a stray cat, and I'm still trying to figure I'm good at it, right? But no, it's a good question, actually. I think given the background of having served in the Marine Corps, having been in both the government and the commercial sectors, I've seen all kinds of different leadership philosophies, ways of working. And what I think it comes back to, I'm a huge proponent, and people probably get tired of hearing this, but I always believe that if you amplify the human, put the human at the center of everything you do, then you will be in good shape. Technology, process, those things are all there to enable the human, right? And I think sometimes that we talk about putting our people first, and yet we forget that the people have to follow a process. The people have to use the technology. I've got certifications in several different process frameworks, whether it's CMMI, Six Sigma, Baldrige, and ultimately they all come down to the process is only as good as the people that follow them, right? And so as a leader, and I think that's the other component, is that leadership still matters in today's day and age, regardless of what the technology is. People want to be led. They don't want to be managed. They want to be led. And so my probably the biggest takeaway out of all that time is that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you.
So Perry, what do you say for those leaders who tend to overemphasize the process and technology and almost forget the human aspect?
And it's almost natural. You kind of fall into that trap sometimes too, just because the latest technology, the latest, process, it becomes a crutch. And I think they fall back on that because it makes their lives easier, right? But the reality is it doesn't, right? I think all of the technology, improvements that we've seen over the years, in some ways they've made our lives more challenging or more complex in different ways, right? And so, when you find yourself spending most of your time thinking about process or thinking about the technology that enables that process, you probably need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what have I done today for my people? What have I done today to amplify or enable the human? Because ultimately, the reality is we're in the brand and the agency world, right? And I've been and again, my background is so scattered in some ways. At the end of the day, businesses don't do business with people. Brands don't do business with brands. They all do business with people, right? And sometimes I think that we forget that at the center of everything we do, regardless of whether it's business, life, whatever, it's humans. And you have to be able to interact and relate as humans. And, JL, you mentioned one of our design principles, one of our very first design principles, lead with empathy, right? And with transformation, you have to demonstrate empathy for not only your team, but the people who are going through in what, in many instances, is a significant amount of change.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, everyone wants change. Nobody wants to experience change, let alone lead change.
We often want somebody else to change.
Right.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. Let
So
the world,
it's always
but don't touch my space.
right. No, I want things to be better, but don't change what I have to do. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I do think that is interesting. Like you're one of those rare people that you hear the word change and you step forward when most people want to step back. I'm curious, like being the person who steps forward, how do you help people step forward with you? Like, what does that look like? How do you do that?
I recently had to do my own self evaluation, which I hate doing because you have to talk about yourself and you have to like, I just don't like doing that. Right. So anyway, I took it seriously because I think it's a good exercise to do periodically to look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you doing what you need to do as a leader, as whatever? And I tried to put some time and emphasis in it. And I actually used AI as part of the process. And so give you a perfect example of enabling slash amplifying the human. Rather than trying to draft what I thought I should say about myself, I just did a brain dump into the chat with AI, right? And I highlighted some things that I feel very strongly about, principles, whatever you want to call them, and just literally put it into the chat. And I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. And so that again, AI will do a lot of things, but you have to give it context. And so I provided the context. And rather than me talking about me, I let it talk about me. Right. So it came back with some really interesting stuff. And when I kind of looked at it and internalized it, I was like, you know what? That's actually really good. And one of the things is I love being the calm at the center of the storm. That's where I thrive. Right. So whether it's been sports, whether it's been the military as a mission planner or as a CEO, former CEO, I'm at my best when I'm at the center of the storm. And so what I try to do, because I know that everybody else has different ways of dealing with stress, has different ways of dealing with priorities, interpersonal stuff, is I try to help them find clarity, not just as relates, the project. So for example, with the Hydra program, the migration of all of our SAP and other OPCO ERPs onto SAP and then Workday, they all have challenges. And one of the big things is just to keep everybody focused on what success looked like, right? So as a team, success looked like getting everybody onto SAP as quickly and uniformly as possible. Very powerful statement, by the way. And then whether it's, one of my program leads, whether it's one of my SAP, subject matter experts, whoever it might be, they have the focus. And my job is to provide the clarity. They need to stay focused both as a project team and as an individual. So if you're a technologist, if you're a program person, if you're a data person, or if you're whatever, you have to have clarity in your role as relates to the program in order to best do your job. And the other thing is that everybody on the team has to lead, right? I think a lot of teams think that, well, I've got a program lead, I've got a whatever. It's their job to lead. No, it's not. It's everybody's job to lead. And if you do that, right? So selecting your team with purpose, if they're all leading, man, you've created something powerful.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that JL and I see as well. We've almost trained people to follow instead of to lead.
Right.
And then we wonder why we have people that lack accountability and ownership. Well, you told them to just put their head down and follow.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is that in many ways, the role of a leader is to serve, right? That's what a role of a leader really is to serve. And part of that is deflecting anything that becomes a distraction from the people on your team. You play that filter, right? So if stuff comes up that they shouldn't have to deal with, then that's your role, is to remove that kind of stuff from getting in the way of doing a job. And the other thing which is interesting is, so years ago, I took on a CEO role, and it was interesting because as a CEO, you have all the power, all the responsibility, all the authority to do a lot of things. But ultimately, your success is 100% tied to the success of your people. And I don't think a lot of people realize that you could be CEO, you've got all the authority to hire, fire, do whatever. Your success is only going to be as good as theirs.
Right. It is interesting. It's that differentiation between like that authoritarian leadership and then that more influential leadership. I think when we lean into that authoritarian side, lots of bad things happen, and it always makes me think of that, first year psychology experiment everyone talks about with Stanley Milgram, where they do the whole shocking people to learn and everything. If you're listening, and you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up, read about it. It's fascinating, but it just kind of points out the more you exercise your authority, the more you are training people to rely on.
So how do you balance? Because there is a need to have, I don't know if authoritative is the right term here, but there's a need to have a solid vision, and in a business setting, almost a mandate, like we will change. Well, how do you balance that with still empowering people? Where is the balance there?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I don't think it's a clear-cut thing, right? It could be 50-50 one day, 70-30 the next day, and vice versa. So I think that couple things. One, when we started the Hydra program, right, we without knowing we did this, but in retrospect, we did, and that's why we've codified it, is there were three critical success factors. And I think they are absolutely non-negotiable. If you want to do transformation, you have to have these three in some way, shape, or form. So the first one is focus from it. You have to have a mandate. If you don't have a mandate, then transformation is just a well-intentioned suggestion. That's about all it is. You have to have a mandate. You have to select the team purposely. If you put just the people who happen to be available on that team, then you really haven't dressed that team for success. So you have to pick and choose the people you want on that team by design, right? And you have to have active leadership support, right? I know each of us has seen over careers, something gets spun up, it's a great idea, and then it fizzles because senior leadership is not involved. And when I mean involved, it's on a recurring basis and on an as needed basis. So there are several instances where we had changes that came up, whether it was a merger or whether it was a technology thing, whatever it happened to be, that had cascading effects to the program. And so we would bring forth what we call the POV, right? And we would articulate, we wouldn't bring it to the steerco as a challenge. We would say, here's the issue. Here are the impacts. Here are your courses of action. Here are your decisions or options. And that would get them to make a decision. So they were decisive, right? You've got all these senior leaders around the table and they can make a decision and be decisive. From those critical success factors, you as the leader are empowered. You have permission, right? You have the mandate to go forth and be successful, right? So you have been empowered by senior leadership to do XYZ. That also allows you to do something similar for each of the people on your team, right? And then it's your responsibility to enable them, right? So whether it's downstream meetings, whether it's providing clarity in their role, whether it's giving them permission, right? Because a lot of times they're not used to having permission, right? You say, hey, you can go do this. And they go, really? And it's like, yeah, go do it. And then you have to support it. And sometimes they go off the reservation a little bit, they wander outside the color, outside the lines. And that, sometimes people don't like that. And then you have to stand up for them, right? And you have to say, hey, look, that's on me. I gave them the direction. Maybe I wasn't clear enough, but you got to own it, right? As the leader. And your team will see that you didn't hang them out to dry or you didn't make an excuse or whatever. You owned it. And now they've learned that they can trust you, that they are truly empowered, and that they have learned from the experience, and now they're better for it. And they can go and do their thing and be really good at what they did.
I love that. And I think, well, one, I think that's really great. I think the other part is if people don't know, you have a series on LinkedIn of articles that are talking about these design principles. So everyone go to LinkedIn, one, connect with Perry, and then two, read his articles. Like you'll get a lot more than what a 15, 20-minute conversation can provide in terms of what the principles are.
Right,
That being
right.
said, Perry, where do we go from here? Like what's next in the transformation world at the enterprise level? And what do you think leaders maybe aren't preparing for that they should be?
It's so funny you asked that because I've been doing this a while now. If you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that I've been doing this a while now. And maybe it's my hair color is the giveaway. Anyway,
Christmas white.
I think transformation is change over time. right? And one of the articles I wrote used the second star to the right, straight on to morning. So the Peter Pan thing. I've always loved that quote. I think it's inspirational, but I also think it is very practical, right? Second star to the right, straight on. I know what my focus is. I know what my North Star is. I know where I'm going. And then I can run into all kinds of things between there and there, but I know where I'm going. And I think for transformation, right, you have a start point, you have multiple intermediary points, and somewhere down the road, you have what target state or future state looks like, right? I think in many instances, companies get to an interim state or a target state, and then they think that's good enough. And it's not, right? They lose sight of the fact that their real future state, real success ultimately is enabling the people, right, to do and bring their best work to the table. So we have simplified a lot of systems. We had a lot of homegrown ancillary systems that we have, migrated onto a common platform or got done away with because we don't use them anymore, right? We're not done yet. Now we have this thing out there called AI. Now, however you describe that, one of the things that would be really good to get out of your ERP system, for example, right? Visibility across your entire revenue and cost structure. So if I'm a CEO or I'm a CEO, or if I'm a project lead and I've got a major client, wouldn't it be cool to be able to go into the financial system and get the things you need, the insights, and I'll come back to that term, that you need to best serve the client, right? Because that's what we're ultimately here for, is to make the client happy and best serve the company and your people. So I've got a background in knowledge management, and knowledge, by definition, is information that has context and is actionable, right? We'll apply that to data or information. It's the same thing. I have lots of data. We're drowning in data. But insights, to me, are data or information that has context and is actionable. So if I'm a project lead, if I'm the CEO or whatever, it has to have context and has to be actionable. And if you have those two things, you become very effective, right? So that's just one instance. But what other simplification can we get to? How can we take costs out of the business that aren't adding value to either our client, the business, or our people, right? So I think there's still a lot of juice to be squeezed out of the organization. And it's not about taking costs out of the organization. There is some of that, right? Because organizations over time, costs just accumulate. But you're trying to take costs out of the system so that you can focus them in the places you need to focus them in to be competitive, to take care of your people, to grow, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So if it's purely a cost exercise, then I don't think you're fulfilling what transformation really, really is about.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I love it. I think we can probably dive into this for another hour or two and not get to the bottom of things.
Great topic.
But Perry, if people are interested in connecting with you and learning more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably the best thing is LinkedIn, just because, like you mentioned, I have been writing articles. I've actually going to put, I just posted one on AI because obviously it's a topic of interest. And again, it needs to evolve around the human. And I think it's more of a change thing than it is a technology thing, to use layman's terms. So I think LinkedIn would be best. And, we can go from there. My email's out there, all that kind of stuff. But LinkedIn's kind of a common platform. And, I can then force them to read my articles, which helps my.
Yeah, there we go. There's some of that authoritarian power there. Read my articles or
It,
else. No, I love that. Yeah, exactly. Well, Perry, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. For everyone else who's made it all the way to the end with us, thank you for being here. While you're hitting that 5th star for the 5-star rating, leave a comment. Let us know how transformation works for you and what insights you gained from listening to Perry chat through his experiences. We'd love to hear from you. That being said, Perry, thank you again so much. This was absolutely fantastic.
Yes, great to see you guys as always, and love talking about this topic. I think it is more relevant now than it has been at any point in the past, to be honest with you. And I think it's only going to accelerate. So great topic for the topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, good seeing you guys.
Awesome. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
Take care. Bye.